All right, welcome back to the Kaspa Silver YouTube channel. And today we have Shai, one of the core developers for Kaspa, with us. And I'm so excited to have you on here. I've had a lot of requests to actually get you on here, and people were always telling me that you should come on, and it would be awesome. And I never thought I would actually have you on here when I started the channel, but the channel's just blown up, and the support has been crazy. And Kaspa's just been booming recently a lot. So we're gonna go ahead and deep dive into the tech, into all that fun stuff that I like to talk about. So just to start, let's start off with your background. You know, how you found Kaspa and kind of where it started. Just give a brief little summary of how that started, and then we can get into other stuff.
Okay, cool. Well, first, thanks for having me. It's really flattering that there is such a demand for my presence. I'm still not used to all the kinds of good and bad attention that come with being on the front of a project that has become so unexpectedly popular. I like to say that I didn't find Kaspa as much as Kaspa found me. I used to be interested in crypto way back in the 2013, 2014, where there are basically like, I don't know, 10, 15 different coins that you'd hear about. And at some point, I kind of lost interest in the crypto world because I've seen a lot of problems, but hardly any solutions. It seems that the scalability issues and the usability issues were not going away, and there were attempts to use Bitcoin and other cryptos, which didn't go quite as planned, and the state of the market became it became like a place that is very fruitful for like get-rich schemes and all kinds of I don't know. I don't know the investment terminology, but I mean, just like it becomes like this wasteland, which is unregulated and full of people who want to make a quick buck and full of people who want to exploit it. And it seems like this entire industry has lost direction. And I was not very committed to it. So I said, okay, I'm going to buy some coin and have it on the side in case it gets traction, but I don't really believe this is going to be more than like this magical internet money that nobody really understands what is it good for and how to use it, but it's there. And this was about 2014, 2015, when I just kind of completely lost sight of this entire industry and went about doing other stuff. From an academic point of view, I kept tracking what's going on because I thought it's interesting mathematically, but like the industry and the market completely fell off my radar. And then during my PhD studies, I was assigned to be a teaching assistant in a course about introduction to algorithms in the Hebrew University, and I got the names of the other two teaching assistants, and one of them was this guy called Jonathan Sompolinsky, which I've never heard about before. So I went to his office with the other TA, Moran, and we started talking and got to know each other, and we became more familiar as the semester went on and became friends. And then he told me he's going to start a company. It took me a while to realize who he was. Right off the bat, I know that he's interested in crypto because I know that his advisor was Aviv Zohar, which is like a legend in the crypto research and crypto industry. But at some point, he told me something about, when we invented the Ghost protocol, and I was like, hold on, what? You didn't invent Ghost. You mean the Ghost protocol from Ethereum? And he said, yes, we made it up. It's our protocol. And I don't. Then things started to click that he's like a fundamentally serious guy. He told me that he's gonna open a company to implement one of his protocols, and asked me if I wanted to join. And I said, no, I don't want to go into crypto. I don't believe in crypto. I did tell him, well, I have this friend who is like this God tier programmer whose dream was always to build a cryptocurrency from scratch. His name is Mike Zack. I'll give you his number, give him a call. And I think that's like the first, he was like the zeroth Dag Labs employee, Mike. He brought on, I think, most of all of the other programming team back in Dag Labs. For those who don't know, Dag Labs was a company that was created to implement this protocol. It was eventually fair lunch, and Dag Labs eventually was closed. But this is how we got started. But I wasn't really interested in joining the efforts. But I started because Yoni is my friend and Mike is my friend, and I like kept track and kept hearing things that's going for inside, and then things started to pique my interest when I took a deeper dive into GhostDAG, and I was starting to get convinced that this thing is actually a scalable proof of work, which I didn't believe is really possible. I've heard about projects that try to do this, but whenever I read about a protocol, it was very immediate to me that either it is flawed inherently or very hard to implement correctly, and I don't know, something told me that if a project has any chance to make it, it would be this effort, and even if it wouldn't, it would be fun. The name Kaspa wasn't even a thing then. Like, we started to fight about how we were going to call the coin like only 2 years after that. And at this point, it was more, we weren't even sure that we were going to launch a coin. We thought maybe we were going to come up with other technologies, doing consulting. I know, but it wasn't really my decision. I don't know what happened like in the how do you call it, executive meetings. But from my point of view, it took a while before there was like a coherent vision of what exactly we want to do, what we want to implement. I just know that it's going to be a hell of a ride. So I got on. And initially my role wasn't even in a research capacity because I only wanted a student job. I suggested that I would come and do like a spec writing, like talk to everyone, see what needs to be done, and then like fully flesh out the details to communicate the researchers to the programmers. But that didn't last long because there were a lot of research issues that needed to be solved, and before we noticed, I just did research all of the time there, and we gave up on this spec writing thing. And that's how it's been ever since, up to the point where I left Dag Labs. At some point, Dag Labs said that they want to pivot from research to more of a development effort. And I said, okay, have good luck with that, but I think I don't want to be in development. I don't like software development. I've worked for a few years in software development, and it's not what I like to do. So we parted as friends. I kept in touch, but gradually and slowly I lost track. I became more and more out of the loop. And then one day, it was like, I don't know if it was like just a coincidence or divine intervention or I don't know. But one day I opened the Telegram, which I hardly do because I never used Telegram for anything outside Dag Labs. And I've seen like the Dag Labs channel very, very active and a lot of things going on. So I went in and I was like, hey guys, what's going on? How are you? It's been a while. And they told me, mainnet launched today, start mining. So I did. And since these guys, they were inside the loop all of this time, then they knew what to do. They had a very deep understanding of the code base. They knew all of the nuances of all of the decisions that were. I left Dag Labs in the last day of 2020, and mainnet launched in November of 2021. So I've been outside the loop for almost a year. So at this point, I couldn't contribute directly to the code base. I don't think I should contribute directly to any code base. And so I took more of a community capacity. I said to myself, these guys are now tremendously busy, and someone needs to communicate what they're doing to the community, and someone just needs to make a community happen. And people were coming in by the hundreds every day, and I said, okay, I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna handle the community, and for a while I managed it almost single-handedly, and then I started to assign more people, and then I started to drift away. And my intention was to, at some point, to have other people managing the community. And I think up to a few months ago, my capacity was mostly to communicate the theory. I did contribute in some discussions, but most of the abstract decisions, the mathematical decisions, the decisions that are not implementation and coding details were already made at this point. So I didn't have much to contribute to the development. But a few months ago, that changed, because now that Rusty Kaspa is a thing, and we talk about high block rates, then all of a sudden there are a lot of theoretical problems that we need to solve. For example, this whole saga about I don't know if you follow this, because it's like brass tacks, but we had to come up with how to do difficulty adjustment efficiently and sample difficulty blocks, and there are a lot of other things that needs ironing out. And so I'm very glad about that in the last few months I got to actually contribute some research and some math and some ideas again, and solve problems that needed to be solved for Kaspa. I do hope to dive into the code base soon. We have an idea. I don't know if it's going to happen. I'm going to spoil the surprise anyway. I asked Michael to walk me through the Rust code base and just tell me what's going on. And he said, okay, but why don't we do it live? We're just going to record it. Anyone could join. You will ask the questions, I'll answer them, but we'll make it public so that everyone else who wants a guided tour of the Rust code base could be a part of it. And I think this is where I stand with Kaspa at this point. So this is my story.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome, man. And yeah, I love hearing the story and how the inception of Kaspa, because a lot of people love the story of Bitcoin and how it's an anonymous person and kind of just sent an email out like, hey, here's a white paper, I created this. And when I first found Kaspa myself, what caught my attention was first the price action, of course, because we were in a brutal bear market and there was nothing going on really for crypto. Everyone, thinks is going to die every single time we go through this. But Kaspa was simply just riding a different wave. It was in its own world, and I was so curious why. And I had just transitioned to basically becoming a Bitcoin maxi because I started researching the tech. And the tech is what really got me more passionate about Bitcoin, because it's the reason why I believe it's number one is that tech, that trustworthiness of it, and why it's just been able to be stable and not have any problems with it all from all these years. But once I started researching Kaspa and seeing that there was no ICO, there was a fair launch, and that there was a company behind it, but it's no longer exists anymore, it really caught my attention. And right when I got into that white paper, I knew I was dealing with something huge here, because most white papers of other crypto protocols are mainly just words, and they're sometimes just 1 to 2 pages. And when I saw that Kaspa had multiple white papers, in fact, basically, technically, it's like you have Ghost, and then you have Spectre, Phantom. You have all these white papers that basically eventually create Kaspa. It just shows the amount of time and detailed and effort that has gone into this, especially by Jonathan. And I want to ask you, what are your opinions on the fact how, like yesterday, I saw a tweet. Someone said that a real crypto project wouldn't dox themselves. And I saw that tweet, and that was funny to me. I'm like, what? Like, I feel like if anything, that's more transparent than not knowing who's behind a project. And I know Bitcoin has a very unique inception with a person that no one knows. But I did tell him, I was like, look at Bitcoin Core. Bitcoin Core is basically the program that all the nodes run. And if Bitcoin Core was to become unhonest, then basically the nodes would be able to use a different client that runs the Bitcoin network correctly. And I was wondering your opinions on like the fact that you guys are not anonymous, you know, the founder isn't anonymous. Is that a problem for Kaspa? And also, how does it work with the code when it comes with, let's say if you guys were to be unhonest, how does it work? Why are we so decentralized? And I want to kind of get into that a little bit more. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so these are two separate questions, I believe. The tweet that you mentioned, and like it's funny to me that we even bring it up. It was so weird. Like I've never heard. I even left a rash response, but I don't think that having a docs team is a problem. I never actually even stopped to think about like the meaning of the team being doxed. Like it's just how it's always been. I get that some teams are anonymous. I never stopped and asked why. What does this mean about the project? Maybe because I'm not an investor and I am not a trader, so the only reason I get to read about a project is if I found the tech interesting. So there are projects with interesting tech, and then I go on and I say, I looked at the tech and it seemed interesting. Some people think it's an endorsement. It isn't, because I never check the economics. I never check the team. I never check anything. I just read like the math and see, is it interesting math or is it not interesting math? But interesting math is not enough for a project to be good. Mm-hmm. So I had this iteration with Dynex and with Taraxa. So I'm not saying these are bad projects by any means. I'm just saying I looked at these projects and it seemed interesting on a theoretical level, and that's basically all I just said. Now, I believe, if I remember correctly, that the Dynex team is anonymous. I don't remember. Maybe I shouldn't name names, but the point is that I never given any serious thought to what it tells me that a team chooses to remain anonymous. It might be a bad sign. It might not be a bad sign. It might really depend on the context. I guess that like if you have like a Chinese team or concerned about government retaliation, then it's like a very good reason to remain anonymous. But if people want to remain anonymous because they took a huge chunk of the coin and they want to evade tax, then it's not that good of a sign for the coin. So like it's really context dependent. But that's when you asked me why a project is anonymous. But I've never been asked why a project is doxed. Like, isn't it obvious? We work hard. We want to be appreciated for our work. We want people to know who is behind the origins of the work, because if they know us, then they could trust us and they could listen to us and they could challenge us and argue us. But we have like an identity which is separate of the project. And I think that's very important. Also, just professionally wise, like my professional interest is that I want to be acknowledged for the work I did for Kaspa, because that would open doors for me personally. So the only reason I see for a project to remain doxed is if for either people are doing something fishy or they have a legitimate concern to avoid the exposure. You know, it could be even emotional. It could be just like, as far as I know, it could be that X project has undoxed undoxed creators because like the guy running the project has social anxiety and he doesn't want to handle the exposure. It's completely reasonable. I don't think that's a bad thing. But the more I talk about it, the more I realize that I don't have really anything very sharp to say about this. I just thought it was a very weird point to make. I've never heard anything like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, I just see it as being more transparent, and but could understand like some people just don't like the attention. Like personally, myself, being a YouTuber and everything, like it's always been like a passion, dream kind of mine, but it's never been like now that I kind of got going with it, like I don't really like the attention. I wish I could do it and just not have the attention or people really know who I am like that. But it just comes with being transparent and building trust with people.
Yeah, I guess
But
I think I'm gonna write a book someday about the emotional aspect of finding yourself leading a project that is gaining popularity. And I think I have a unique perspective. I think most people that are leading a project, so like I am not the leader of the project. There isn't one person who is the leader of the project, but I think I have a lot of weight in the community, like Michael has, and like Yonatan has, and Ori has, and because not because our name is written somewhere in some permissioned list, just because I think we earned some respect. But I think most of the people in a position which is similar to mine are people who have been a part of the crypto industry and the crypto sphere and this crypto society for a long while. And I wasn't. I was completely out of touch with anything non-academic. My entire exposure to crypto was academic. I was not a part of any public anything. And then I just kind of got hurled headfirst into the space and gained like a lot of attention of like both positive and negative attentions of kinds I didn't even know existed almost overnight. And I made mistakes, but I mean, I like it to some degree. I think I have to like it, but it has a price. I'm mostly doing it because I think it's very good for the project. I would be much happier, just keeping to myself. And it's a very, very interesting experience. And I think a lot of it, let me know if I'm going too much on this tangent, but it's just, it's an aspect that doesn't come up in interviews at all.
yeah, no, we want to talk about different things here, so.
Yes, we had a talk before that. I just said that I always get asked the same things, so I might just exploit this platform to say other things I want to talk about. But I think the thing is that I see that a lot of people, especially people who find themselves in like a role which carries weight and responsibility, they always try to assume the same demeanor, to be like this calm and collected, and they never let out like an emotion, like someone pisses them off, and they like try to shrug it and try to act as if like, no, I'm not angry, you're angry. And I tried to play this game, but I just can't. I'm an emotional person, and I think I'm trying to spin it into an advantage. I think like when you being emotional, when you try to like I lost the word. When you try to go against your nature and your temperament, and then you just become very, very sensitive, and you force yourself to be calm and collected, but everything gets under your skin. But if you let out like some anger and some passion and some the way other people make you feel, I think it's healthier. It gives you a healthier venting of your emotion and handling all of this emotion. But more so, it's just, I think, it provides some testament to the other side of how much this thing is really important to you. Because the reason Kaspa emotionally resonates with me is because it's not just a code base. It's this amazing accomplishment which has so many aspects to it, from the tech and the research and the code and the community and all of the things that we've done together. It just became so meaningful to me that I can't be calm and collected about it. And I don't want to make this impression. I want to let on that this thing is very precious to me. So I think this is like an example of an approach that I'm assuming that is maybe unorthodox because of my this weird point of view of someone who is, I mean, I guess a bit more emotional than your typical project leader, who was just hurled into the space without any warning about what's going to happen, without any guidance. So I think this is like an interesting aspect I would love to dive into at some opportunity.
Yeah, that's really cool. And yeah, that's what I've noticed from the project too, is that the people behind it, the devs and whatnot, it's not people who, I feel like they're more themselves. When you look at other projects, you most of the time you don't even get to talk to these people who are up there, the top 10 or whatever, or they put on a fake kind of facade of who they are really as a person. But everyone is very genuine in themselves, and especially for someone like Jonathan, who, the founder of Kaspa and behind a ton of the protocols. He's a very quiet individual. He's not on Twitter just speaking about things probably wouldn't be smart to be speaking about. I mean, I like to make the comparison with something like Litecoin. I know the founder of Litecoin eventually sold all of his holdings because he was very public about the price, and people started getting on him saying, you're manipulating the price or whatever. And as a founder, I feel like Jonathan is doing a really good job of almost not even really being the central person, because there's really no central person in this project, so to speak, in terms of when we talking about the code. And it's the reason why that exists is because of the tech. So if you could maybe dive into why Kaspa is decentralized, how does that really work?
Yeah, like I'm in the process of compiling a list of all the ways that Kaspa is decentralized. I think one thing that I wanted to get into before I went on this whole tangent about my emotions is that one thing that's very important to us is to decentralize the development. You asked me, what if the code becomes unreliable in some way? What if somehow the code is manipulative, and the protocol is not what it seems to be? And it's an actual problem, because the only way to see such a thing is for people who really understand the protocol to be able to look at the code and say, okay, these rules make sense. Like, we have the consensus rules. Any client has to follow the consensus rules, but are these rules what they're supposed to be? Or, you know what, it's not even on the consensus. Like, we could, technically, one could create a manipulative version, which will work as intended outwards, but it would do manipulative stuff like not broadcasting transactions from sources that they don't like, or not. You could technically make a malicious node which does follow the consensus rules, so it would be legit. But it would do subtler stuff like say, I am a miner, and I also control the code base, so I could somehow manipulate the code base so it would give preference to my blocks, or drop like some of my competitor's block, or this kind of stuff. And it's stuff that is really hard to notice. So the best way to fight this kind of thing is to have a lot of scrutiny and a lot of people that look at your code and see what's going on and make sure that there isn't any funny business. And for this, you really need a community of developers, and you need to have people who came from the community who can look at the project. You need to have the attention of experienced developers, even if they don't develop for you, that they would have incentive to look at your code and say, hey, there is something weird going on here. So you get this by first being open source. The fact that you're open source already allows anyone to scrutinize you. Anyone knows exactly what code is being run on in any node. But the other thing is that we don't want to the development of the node. I'm not even talking about Ecosphere. I'm talking about the core code base, like the client. We don't want it to have only the original contributors understanding and maintaining the code base. We want to expand our community of developers, and this is why from the very start it's been very, very important to us to be very hands-on. So I think, from what I understand, from my interest, my experience in researching other projects, that Kaspa is a project that's very easy to get into, in the sense that whatever questions you have, the answers are out there. And I think it's absurd how some projects are very hard to research. Like, I tried to find out the Kadena block size, for example. I just wondered how large can a Kadena block be? That's a reasonable question, right? And the answer is out there eventually, but you have to look for it really well. And not because they're hiding it, but just because maybe making information approachable is not as much as a priority. And it's just an example, okay? It's just literally any project I tried to research, I found myself having to go to the Discord or the Telegram channel of the project to ask questions which I thought there should be very readily available. Things about, block sizes, think about the consensus protocol, think about, I don't know, a lot of stuff. And like in the worst case, there are projects where you come and ask a few questions and they tell you to read the code base. Like, that's the only reference, read the actual code. And it makes things very inaccessible. So it was very important for us to be very hands-on and make things very available, especially with a project with these levels of complexity. I mean, GhostDog is hard to understand, and understanding GhostDog is just the first step, because if you try to implement GhostDog naively, then your implementation would be very inefficient. And essentially, there are a lot of bottlenecks that need to be removed gracefully and require a lot of ingenuity. I'll give you one example. Say I'm giving you like 2 blocks on the DAG, and I tell you, are these blocks parallel, or is one of the blocks in the path of the other block? So Kaspa does these kinds of queries, like we call these reachability queries. So reachability queries happen all of the time. I don't know how familiar you are with the protocol itself, but there is a stage in the protocol when you take your selected parents and then you traverse the anticon, what we call the anticon. You just traverse the set of blocks that are neither in the past nor in the future of these, all of the parallel blocks. How do you even know if a block is parallel? How do you do it efficiently? And it turns out to be a very, very difficult problem. Michael Sutton eventually solved it because he's incredibly smart, and because he came with some arcane knowledge about similar problems from his master thesis, where he had to deal with similar problems. Before him, I tried to solve it and I couldn't. And another guy who worked on Doug Labs, I wouldn't say his name because he's not involved anymore. So I don't want if he wants to be named, but he also tried for a few months and wasn't able to. And that's just one example of a single thing which is very hard to do efficiently. But if you can't do it efficiently, then your code would be very slow and you couldn't support 1 BPS and obviously not 10 BPS. So, okay, I went on a tangent again, but my point is that since day one, we wrote tutorials, we wrote posts, we were spending a lot of effort and time answering questions in the Discord about anything from like there wasn't at economics on the start, but starting from who we are and what is the general idea and up to people asking very specific and intricate questions, we tried to build up strong community members who weren't part of Dag Labs of the original team, but are familiar with the intricacies and the subtleties to the point that they can debug the code and understand problems in the code and understand what's going on in the node. And I think we're starting to see rewards for that in several ways. I think the main one is that I think our community is exceptionally technical. I think that a lot of people, including non-technical people, really understand what's going on and why it's important. Maybe they don't understand exactly the nuances. I see a lot of recurring mistakes, like people thinking that increasing the block size will decrease confirmation time. Increasing block size will not decrease confirmation times. But I think that's rewarding in itself because I see like stuff that I worked a lot, very hard to explain in posts or in discussions. I see people reiterating what I said, but they're not copy-pasting what I said. They're explaining it in their own words, they're adding their own spin and interpretation, and generally they are right. And I think this means two things. One, that we draw in people that really want to know and are passionate enough to deep dive, and that we did a good job explaining. And this creates strength. It creates a community which understands what's going on. It's not people who say why Kaspa is awesome. They don't reiterate like a page of slogans. They really understand why what we're doing is so exceptional. And the second way, I think we saw this come to fruition is that we have community developers that are becoming proficient enough with the code base to contribute to the actual client code. Three community members, Tiram, Haunted Cook, and JWJ, are prominent examples. They actually made very significant contributions to the code base of the Rusty Kaspa client, not something that, and you see, we have a lot of people coming in doing block explorers and like charting and wallets and all sorts of interesting stuff. But what I think is really amazing is that people from outside, people who weren't involved, people who didn't have the leisure to get paid a full job salary to come and develop this thing, became proficient enough with the code base to actually contribute to the client. And I think this is like key to decentralization, having many people who actually understand the client code.
Yeah, that's important to me, especially because when I started my channel, I've been through the last crypto bull market, and I was more on the sidelines, just watching other influencers talk about cryptocurrency, and I got to kind of experience my first bull market, bear market, and kind of see the emotions and everything that's going on. And from my channel, I hope people learn on my channel that if someone asks you what is Kaspa, you're trying to explain someone what is Kaspa, the first thing isn't, oh, it's because it's going to $1. because that I think that is like the worst way to actually explain an investment, because this is people's money that we're dealing with here. And I think I've always said on my Twitter that Kaspa will win with education. I think research and education is what's going to make Kaspa win, because that's why Bitcoin is number one. It's because of the tech. It's what holds it up, is because it's been able to prove itself that it's resilient, and it's going to be number one because people can trust it. And building that trust all comes from how the tech works, how the economics work, how the coin allocations work, and all that kind of stuff that all goes into it. And if people don't understand the significance of just simply being fair launched or just simply being a proof of work, I think Kaspa is not going to succeed if people don't understand like how amazing being a proof of work and accomplishing what we're doing is. Like that's pretty crazy. We're trying to do things that has not been seen in a proof of work, especially when considering a protocol like Dagnite that's coming in the future, which again, I personally don't understand all of these protocols in and out. I try my best to understand them and explain them to my viewers, but I think I understand them to a point that my viewers can see the magnitude of how great the technology behind Kaspa is, and also the risk involved, the fact that development is going to take time. This is all new stuff. It's not like these things are going to come right away. And you mentioned on Twitter that we're going to be seeing 10 blocks per second on testnet tomorrow.
Probably tomorrow, yes.
Probably tomorrow. But again, no confirmation that it is going to happen, because these things are just, no one knows how the code really can work and all that kind of stuff. So, but I've been trying to remind people, this is just testnet. This is still not mainnet. This isn't. But we're at least going to see it put into practice on a testing level and see how things are going to start working on that. You mind diving into how 10 blocks per second is going to look and what that kind of holds now moving forward?
Yeah, sure. But before that, I just want to comment on something else you said right now, that you do your best to understand how the protocols work, and that's commendable. I always appreciate people who try to understand our work. But I personally think that before you try to understand how the protocols work, when I just started out, when people told me what Kaspa is, and I was like, okay, a directed acyclic graph is a mathematical construct, and I kind of evolved out of this, and now when I explain what Kaspa is to non-computer scientists, I never even use the word DAG. I don't go into this resolution anymore. I think what's more important to communicate is what the protocols achieve, what they do not achieve, and why it's important. I don't want to create any false impressions. I think if at face value, I just tell you what Kaspa does, what GhostDAG achieves, what are its properties, without ever going into under the hood, then it becomes evident why this project is so important. And then if you're curious, you can dive deeper. But I think what I want people to be very fluent about is what are the properties of this protocol, regardless of how the protocol actually works. And I think like the key point here is essentially, yes, the very fast confirmation times. Now, yesterday I was on a podcast where I dove very deep into how confirmation times should be interpreted. I don't think we should go over this again, but the point is that the ability to confirm very fast, the ability to be able to say that if over your block there are like 10 blocks, then you get the same security against 49% attackers than you would get in Bitcoin for 10 blocks, even though our 10 blocks take 10 seconds and their 10 blocks take like 2 hours. And then this is the really crucial part, and this is the thing that previous projects couldn't achieve. And the thing is that even if they do this DAG ordering thing, the convergence of the ordering is very slow. You would have to wait a lot more than 10 blocks to gain a confidence level that is similar to 10 blocks on a chain. Now, I'm deliberately saying 49% attacks, because 51% attacks are a whole different thing. They are about whether your adversary is able to procure more hash rate than the honest network. And this is something which is very hard to gauge. I actually had a very long discussion, not to say argument, about this with the founder of another project who, since I'm not naming the project, I feel free to say that the guy was trying to bash us and debase us with like very bad arguments. And he essentially said that like confirmation times are determined, like the fastest confirmations that you can get are on Bitcoin. Why? Because it has more hash rate. And because it has more hash rate, then the cost of a 10-second attack or like an hour attack on Bitcoin is more expensive. So you'd have to wait a shorter amount of time for this attack to be not beneficial. And this argument is bad for many reasons that I pointed out in a very long Twitter thread. But the 49% thing is like the unique thing here that if you think about it, if you produce a block once every 10 minutes, then you could never confirm a transaction in less than 10 minutes, right? No matter how much hash rate you have. Like when you're talking about small transactions, this becomes more dominant, this thing, because yeah, okay, if I pay you $100 million in Kaspa, then I suggest that you should wait more than 10 seconds. Not because this expensive transactions makes a 49% attack more feasible, but because a 51%, like someone could, I could use like $50 million to hire a 20-second double spend attack. No, I'm not sure it's even possible at this point with the ASICs, but as long as we are talking about 49% attacks and like we just want to be resilient about like lucky computationally inferior attackers, then the fact that we can provide this kind of security so fast is unheard of. And this is like the sudden nuance I want people to understand. And now you're asking how 10 VPS are going to look like. So I'm going to say that I've seen animations. I've seen people like take the KGI animation and then speed it up to be 10 times faster and say, this is what Kaspa is going to look like in 10 VPS, and that's wrong. The graph is not going to get longer. It's going to get wider. Like the length of the main chain is going to increase at the same speed it does today, because this is governed by the network latency. Right? The way, like in Bitcoin, the way a chain is created is when, roughly when a block, all of the networks nodes the block, and then the next block would be above this block, and a chain would be created. What increasing VPS is going to do is increase the amount of parallel blocks and make the graph much wider. So if you imagine KGA in your head right now, and we increase the block rates to be 10 times higher, and what you should imagine is that the scroll to the right is about the same speed, but you would see 10 times more blocks on the width of the graph. So this is essentially why increasing block rates doesn't decrease confirmation times, because you need a lot of blocks above your block and not in parallel to your block. And there are subtleties here, and you can say, okay, but after a short while, even the parallel blocks are above your block. But the thing is that if you increase K, then you're going to have to increase the waiting time, and K will increase with the VPS, so it all kind of cancels each other out, and you're looking at the same confirmation time. And I know it's a bit subtle, but I really want people to understand that block times do not improve confirmation times, because that's governed by network latency. Dagna, on the other hand, can help us improve, because so there is this mysterious parameter K, like the width of the graph, and the thing is, you're estimating what K is going to be. You're estimating the network conditions, and you have to take like this margin of error, because if you are underestimating for a long while, then the security goes to hell. Like the security relies on this K parameter. So if you have heard the term parameterlessness throws around, is exactly that. The protocol doesn't need to have a K in advance. It can tailor the K to the current network conditions, to how the graph looks, and what kind of network conditions nodes report. And this eliminates the need for a margin of error and makes everything more reactive. So once you're like, if we operated some, I don't know, 10 BPS, and 1,000 years from now, the internet becomes so fast that you can have like a chain, a perfect chain, then K would automatically go to 0, and then you would confirm very, very fast. For example, this is an extreme example, but that's an example. So being able to dynamically change this K mysterious parameter and not have it fixed is like the magic sauce of being able to take confirmation times to the fastest possible confirmation times, like without breaking the laws of physics. Now I'm talking about Nakamoto confirmations. There are a lot of tricks to get weaker forms of confirmations faster, which gives you weaker security guarantees. And like the example I like to bring up a lot, a really nice idea is Nexus DS proofs, which gives you instant confirmations, but the type of confirmation that you're getting is much weaker than like Nakamoto confirmation. So honestly, at this point, I don't remember the question, but I hope that I answered it.
Yeah. I kind of want to ask you also, how does that work with fees though? Like, how is the fees always going to remain where they're at? Like right now, are they going to remain where they're at, or could we actually see them go to?
They would have to go up.
They have to go up.
Would have to go up, and they're supposed to go up, because miners have to get paid for securing the network.
Right.
And when the block rewards diminish, they have to get the revenue from other sources. So the point is that having a high TPS means that the fee for a single transaction will remain rather small, but it is a service that has to cost. The way you go, there is this problem of bootstrapping. This is a completely new chain. Nobody is using it. Why should I pay money to use it, right? So the way to bootstrap a network and get people interested and get things going are block rewards. But people should remember that block rewards are just crutches. They are a temporary solution that is supposed to give the network time to draw attention and not rely on attention for a revenue to exist. But it solves the problem of actually creating the coin in a way that it's well spread. Like very recently, I've heard of this project, again, not naming names, which actually minted the entire supply on Genesis. And they said, okay, we're gonna sell it and airdrop it to anyone who wants, and that's why it's decentralized, but you have no way to know that they didn't sell 95% of it to themselves. So the way that you kind of let the money emit gradually and you let anyone compete for this money is another reason you would want block rewards. But again, that's a temporary solution. At the end game, the network should be completely sufficient just from the fees, and this should incentivize the miners. Now, we don't want the fees to be very high, and this is why having a high TPS is important. And we do want to have dynamics which causes the fees to rise as a function of supply and demand. Now, and this is an interesting thing. I think that actually the DAG structure allows a much healthier fee economy or fee market than is possible in a chain. And I'm gonna illustrate this. Just consider the situation where you want your transaction to be on the next Bitcoin block, but you have to have this transaction on the next Bitcoin block. So what you're gonna do? So you're gonna look at the least paying transaction, which is about to be included in the next block, and you're gonna pay 1 Satoshi more, right? And then you're gonna take its place, and you're going to be the least paying transaction. And this is a bet dynamic. It creates a bidding war dynamic. The amount of fee you pay doesn't represent the actual quality of service you're interested in. You just fight about paying as least as possible. And now in Kaspa, we have this parallelism. right? We have this phenomena where the same transaction could be included in several parallel blocks. And who is going to get the reward for this block, for this transaction? The block which is earlier on the Gauss-Dug ordering. So when the miner includes a transaction, they know there is some chance that they are not going to get the reward. When are they not going to get the reward? If another miner included the same transaction and was lucky enough to precede them in the Gauss-Dug ordering. So this incentivizes miners not to not take the most paying transactions, because the most paying transaction would get included the most, so you have the least chance of actually getting the fee. So there is a very deep analysis of this. The math is quite complicated, but you see that the rational strategy, we're not talking about altruism. If you're a miner who wants to maximize your profit, the rational strategy, what you would want to do is to choose transactions at random while giving higher probabilities to transactions which pay more fees. This is like the equilibrium of this mining game that is imposed by having this parallelism. And this has this effect of smoothing out this bid war thing, because paying a single Satoshi more doesn't really change the probability that you will be included, because it just gives you a negligible amount. If you want to really increase the probability of being included soon, you have to pay considerably more. So the dynamic here is that eventually the fee that people pay is not a consequence of bidding war, which have a lot of disadvantages from a game theoretic point of view. It just represents the quality of service that they want. And transactions which pay higher fees would get included faster, and transactions which pay lower fees would have to wait more, because the probability they will be included is smaller, but they wouldn't starve. You wouldn't see this thing in Bitcoin where people fight for the room, and whoever doesn't pay enough just gets stuck forever in the mempool. As long as the transaction isn't like ridiculously small, because miners will ignore transactions which pay like next to no fees, you'd see that lower paying transactions would be included. They would just wait longer. I think this is a very nice property that we didn't expect in advance, that actually makes the fee market much more healthy. And what I think is really cool about this is that you don't have to wait for the network to be saturated to see this effect kicks in. So like in Bitcoin, if say that a Bitcoin block can have like 1,000 transactions, if you have only 900 transactions in the mempool, then there is no reason for anyone to pay a fee, right? Because even if you pay a very small fee, your place is guaranteed, unless miners would decide not to include fees behind a different threshold, and this usually doesn't happen, because then you would just get scooped by another miner. So to see this in effect in Kaspa, you only need the size of the mempool to be larger than the capacity of a single block, like twice the capacity of a single block. If we make 10 blocks per second, on average, like we have 50 parallel blocks, and it suffices like that we have, I don't know, if 2,000 transactions per second to see this effect, even if the network can support like 50,000 TPS. So I think it's really cool that you see like this fee dynamic when the network is still not congested. And like the fact that you need to see congestion to see a fee market in Bitcoin is a problem that a lot of people came up with a lot of solutions of how to resolve, and it seems that like the parallelism, which was initially considered as some sort of like disadvantage or a drawback, because you have like this redundant information, actually creates this very healthy dynamic. So I think with all of these things together, Kaspa is actually very well prepared to the point where fees will have to support the market. And I don't think they would be incredibly high because there is a lot of throughput, and we can increase the throughput if we see a need for it. And then we also have a lot of big ideas about other ways to shape the fee market if we see there is a need for that.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I didn't really think about the fact how having block rewards is kind of just putting off the inevitable that these miners need to get paid somehow, which would be fees. And with Bitcoin, it ends up that's why it's just not able to become cash, so to speak, digital cash. Because I mean, like personally myself, I buy Bitcoin. I want to hold it now just typically as an asset for growth because I don't want to pay $2, $10 to just try to get my Bitcoin to my personal wallet. So personally, I choose the free method, which causes me to have to wait almost 24 hours to actually see my money get into my wallet. And in the meantime, it's just kind of like in the network, whatever. So like, it's like forcing Bitcoin to be like that digital gold, and how Kaspa is being that digital silver, with the fact that mainly it's because we're increasing transactions, because higher transactions would then encourage the fees not to be too high, right? That's how it's gonna work. And I had someone ask me a little bit like, what are the main differences between block per second and then transactions per second? Because transactions are within blocks, from what I understand, my basic knowledge.
Transaction per second is just a measure of it's just what it says. I mean, I think TPS and VPS might sound different, but might sound very similar, but they're actually two very different things, because TPS is just like this very straightforward metrics. How many transactions can you process every second? And if you do like a 10 terabyte block once every 24 hours, then you have very high TPS, but you have other problems, right? BPS, I see a lot of people talk about in Twitter say it's not about the TPS, it's about the BPS, and I guess it's somewhat right, but I think a BPS is a very technical detail which is kind of meaningless on its own. I mean, why should it matter? For, like, if you like, I don't know, you want to create a product which uses some blockchain. I get why it should matter to you. How many transactions can you put out every second? What is the volumes that the network can support? Why should you care about what is the delay between blocks? It's a very internal technical detail. And the thing is that in itself, it's almost meaningless, because you could have high BPS system which has very bad properties, and you can have high BPS systems which have very good properties. And I think what really is important is the confirmation times, the time for first inclusion, how confirmations accumulate, and this is why I stressed this before. Now, a BPS is a means to an end. And the thing is, if you create a block once every 10 minutes, you couldn't confirm transactions faster than 10 minutes. It's impossible. So having like a 1 second BPS is a necessary condition for being able to confirm within seconds. But it's not a sufficient condition, because I can give you examples of protocols that have very high BPS, but in the best case, they confirm as slowly as traditional chains, and in the worst case, they never confirm at all. They have like this liveness attacks. A very known example, and don't take this as bashing because they are aware of it and working to fix it, but IOTA. You ever ask yourself what's going on with IOTA? So they had this kind of problem, what's called a liveness problem, which essentially means that transactions, you can't guarantee how long it's going to take a transaction to confirm. and they solved it in the Tangle-1 mechanism by using what they called coordinators, which are centralized, kind of reminding of how Bitcoin network watchtowers are centralized. And they get to make decisions that should not be made by like a single entity. And again, they are aware of these disadvantages. I'm not bashing them here. And they came up with a solution called Tangle 2, which I know nothing about. I know that the community, the IOTA community, is very excited about it, so it might be very interesting. But since it's a proof of stake, I personally don't find it very interesting to my taste. So the thing is that you have like two networks which have very high BPS, and one of them has like very fast confirmation time, the other one has infinite confirmation time. So what did this particular specification of block rate actually tell you? And the answer is not a lot in itself. The reason we are excited about high BPS is because we know how ghost duck behaves as the BPS increases. We know that the transaction throughput grows linearly with the BPS. It's not as straightforward. Like, people think that if you have 10 times more blocks, then you have 10 times more TPS. Makes sense, right? Because you have 10 times more storage. But it's not strictly true, because you have parallelism, you could have redundancy, but if you do the math, you see that in the worst case, you get like 63%. And typically you'll get more than 80%. So it's like, if I increase the BPS 10 times more, then I'm gonna get 8 times more throughput, which is amazing. And the other thing we know is that it allows us to maybe have even, I don't want to say faster confirmation, but it will allow us to have faster confirmations if network conditions will improve in the future. And it will allow us to have faster confirmations when we switch to Dagnite. And because if Dagnite, and don't take this as like a prediction of confirmation times of Dagnite, but if you see that Dagnite confirms in like 2.5 seconds, and then you couldn't confirm in 2.5 seconds in 1 BPS no matter what you do, because waiting for just 2 or 3 blocks is just not secure enough, even in Bitcoin. But in Dagnite, if we have like this sub-second block times, like 10 millisecond, 100 millisecond block delay, then you could accumulate more than 10 confirmations in a period of time of 2 or 3 seconds, and this will allow you to have better confirmation times. But essentially, I think the consequence of this high block times for now is throughput, and how it increases TPS, and how in the future, with Dagnite present, it would also allow us to give even better scaling of the confirmation times. But that's not true for today, and that's just another example of 2 different protocols with the same BPS and different properties. So I just a shout out to the community. I don't like this BPS is the true metric approach. I don't dislike it either. I guess it conveys the point, but I think more accurate is that it's not about throughput, it's about confirmation times. Of course, you care about how much transactions you could support, but I think you care as dearly or even more dearly about how long someone would have to wait before they know the transaction is gone through. So this is like, I think, the real thing here.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Confirmation times is most important because, especially if we're trying to be cash, you don't want to be at the store and paying for something and the person's like, you need to wait here to make sure this went through or not. We want to make sure that they can go through in seconds. So that is really interesting to see, and what the future holds with these improvements. But I kind of want to go into maybe talking about 2 more topics here. So just talk a little bit about smart contracts. we did have a little bit of buzz when we Jonathan kind of talked about it a little bit, and it was like everyone was going crazy about the fact that mentioning about being a sidechain on Ethereum. And I was really trying to understand what exactly that means. I know it's not really clear to me when I was doing my research. This would mean that it would mean creating like a wrapped version of Kaspa on the Ethereum blockchain, from what I understand. But maybe you can discuss about that a little bit more in detail.
Yeah. So before I do, I'll just emphasize that this isn't about making a choice as what Kaspa will be. At most, it's making a choice about how we divert our resources at this point, because you could use Kaspa both as a self-sufficient smart contract layer and as a sequencing layer for Ethereum. These things do not contradict each other. A chain can do many things, and you can use it as a transactional layer and as a smart contract layer, and you could do a whole lot of stuff. And when you have this insane confirmation speed and throughput, you can do a lot of stuff at the same time. It's not about like choosing the destiny of Kaspa forever, and whoever wants to do something different would have to hard fork. This is not the thinking. Now, you remember, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, Arbitrum had a problem with their sequencing transaction. I don't know the details a lot, but at the bottom line, what happens is that they do sequencing on the Ethereum network, and this component that does the sequencing accidentally didn't pay enough gas. And so the sequencing didn't get verified, and things got stuck. And this is just an example of why we think sequencing Ethereum on Kaspa could be interesting. Because the thing is that even if you have something which is efficient in terms of off-chain solutions, all sorts of rollups, you still have to have some sequencing. Now, what I mean by that is that, what is the point of off-chain solution? On the broad strokes, how do they work? You have this state now, and then people do all sorts of stuff, but they do it off the chain, and then they reach some other state, right? You can even think about it as a transactional thing, like say, we know who has what Bitcoin now, and then a lot of people pay Kaspa or Bitcoin to each other, and then like we had like 1,000 transactions, and then the state has changed, right? And the point of on-chain settlement is that we only do this thing every, I don't know, 10 minutes, every hour. And I don't know how often they settle in Arbitrum, but it would be at least in the minutes. And the thing is that you have this like efficient way to prove that the state, the new state, is actually what would become of the old state after this transaction has happened, and you want to do it efficiently, right? You don't want to put all of the information of what happened on the chain, because then why would you need an off-chain? You didn't accomplish anything. So we use this technique, which is called zero knowledge proofs. It essentially allows me to kind of give you evidence that this state is legitimate, without you having to know the entire process of how the old state came to the new state. And the thing is that you can't know for certain that nobody cheated on the way from the old state to the new state. But what you can do is to create what Arbitrum does. That's why they are called Arbitrum, because they provide some sort of efficient arbitration in case some on-chain arbitration, in case someone said, hey, they cheated. I paid this guy money, and it was supposed to be on the final there, but it wasn't. So there is an efficient way to do it, which requires like a lot less than actually showing the entire evolution of the state and what went wrong. But this requires doing some stuff on chain. This is the sequencing. So no matter how efficient you are, eventually there is going to have to be something which is publicly available on a chain for people to review and see, even if this thing is much more efficient than putting the entire data there. It's just amounts to proofs. And even that turns out to be expensive when you have a low throughput chain like Ethereum. But then you can say, wait, why does it have to be on Ethereum? Okay, Arbitrum happens on Ethereum. They do settle on Ethereum. Eventually, this is about a token above Ethereum moving around. So the settlement is going to happen on Ethereum, but all of this sequencing, why don't do it on Kaspa? It's cheaper, and it has more throughput, and it's still considered secure, and anyone could review it. It requires some bridging and patchwork, but essentially it's technically possible, and it would make sequencing much cheaper because there are a lot more throughput, so you could have a lot more independent sequencer and become much more decentralized this way, because you don't rely on one sequencer, and because everything is much cheaper and simpler, then you don't have to rely as much on an expensive gas, which is easy to not handle correctly. And this is essentially the idea. Now, Arbitrum is just an example, but I brought up this example just because I am familiar with how Arbitrum works, so it's easy for me. But essentially, for any off-chain settlement protocol, we'll have some sort of sequencing that could happen somewhere else. And hey, we can do it. We can support it. Essentially, it means that Kaspa becomes sort of like this utility infrastructure layer for off-chain solutions that settle on Bitcoin. And now I understand why this isn't as appealing as having our own native smart contracts, but I think that such an approach could still be very beneficial because, one, it would create activity, it would just increase the adoption of the Kaspa network, it would create transactions. Why should a miner care what if this transaction is someone paying someone else Kaspa, or it is like sequencing? They still get their fee. They are happy about it. So it would create activity. It would make Ethereum developers more interested in Kaspa, which would be very beneficial in the future when we have our own platform. People would already be familiar, will be comfortable with Kaspa. Now, I'm not trying to argue this is the path we should take because honestly, I feel like I don't know the consideration in depth enough to form like an opinion or like an informed opinion. So I'm just saying the picture as I see it is this. This does seem cool and has a lot of advantages. I would let other people decide if it's worth the effort. But I think people are taking this too harshly. They think, no, you're gonna be Ethereum's slave chain for all eternity, and you don't want to be associated with that. And Ethereum is centralized, so they will think you're centralized. And I don't think so. I don't think any of this holds water. I think it's an interesting utility. It's an interesting way to use the chain. And the only reason not to do it is maybe if we think it shouldn't be a priority. Maybe you think we should divert the resources to something else. So this is just my opinion about this.
Okay, yeah. And just to ask, so would that mean Kaspa having smart contracts in that kind of way, it would still be on the main coin, or would there need to be another coin created that works with Ethereum, like that has an Ethereum contract or something like that?
So we had several ideas in the past for having native smart contracts on Kaspa that doesn't require a token that could be used, implemented with the native coin. But I don't see, I'm not opposed to having tokens running on Kaspa. I don't think that's a bad idea in itself. But I think there should be an infrastructure for smart contracts which is native with Kaspa, which isn't a token on its own, but it might be very simple, and like the more complicated stuff would be a token above. Again, this is one of the things that I don't know the consideration, the economic and the technical consideration very much in depth, so I haven't formed an opinion. I'm not leaning into any direction, but like in principle, I don't think there is anything particularly vicious or wrong about any of these two approaches. I do think one of the things we have done, and this is actually the reason why I keep bringing up Arbitrum, is that we did spend a lot, and I do mean a lot of time, even during the DAG days, thinking about how we can do like an Arbitrum-like thing on Kaspa. Now, there isn't a code base, there isn't a specification, but there are smart people who thought about it a lot and think that this is a viable way to do stuff. I think Jonathan has another design in mind, though I don't know the details about it. But the thing is that there definitely are ways to make interesting native smart contracts on Kaspa, although my personal opinion is that they should be off-chain. I mean, I don't think on-chain smart contracts, like having native support of like this arbitrarily complex functionality is a good idea. I can like explain for an hour straight why I think this is the case. I think that the only benefit of having on-chain complex functionality is if your confirmation times are poor already, and you don't want to make them even worse by like having to wait for a settlement or in each iteration when you do this sequential behavior. I think that since Kaspa can offer these very fast confirmation times, then it could actually implement off-chain solutions like Arbitrum or other kinds of ZK rollups and still provide rapid settlements and eventually be more responsive than on-chain functionality on other chains which confirm much slowly. And I think there are many benefits to taking this approach. So I personally don't think having this arbitrarily complex contracts on-chain is a good way to go. But not everybody agrees with me, and a lot of people have very good points against my point of view. So it's just the way I see things. But whatever path we choose to take, it is a possibility. Like we can do anything on Kaspa. There aren't any inherent limitations. I know some people try to argue that there are because it's comfortably convenient for their narrative, but I haven't seen any argument which really explained what's so inherently different doing smart contracts on a DAG as opposed to a chain. The DAG gives you an ordering, and then you process the contract on the order DAG just as you would on a chain. Doesn't matter what kind of contract or what kind of implementation it is.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting there. And then lastly, I just want to ask, where do you want to see Kaspa, in the future? What is your vision, kind of hoping to see what becomes of Kaspa?
Well, here's the thing. I'm kind of like a mechanic, I helped come up with a new type of engine. I don't know if this means that I'm the person to say what's the best thing to do with this engine, what would be most beneficial to the economy or to mankind or whatever. I actually dislike this idea that if you are capable of coming up with this cool tech, then this means that you are the authority on what's the best way to use it. And the thing is, when it comes to like economy and what problems needs to be solved and how crypto could be used to solve them, then I'm just another guy on Twitter. I'm completely an amateur. So maybe I'm more informed of what is possible and what is not possible technically, but I'm not the one to say what should happen. That being said, I would like to see Kaspa being an infrastructure which is used to build other things on it, including centralized stuff. Like you see a lot of people talk about CBDCs, and they have all sorts of opinions about CBDCs, whether they are good, whether they are bad. I understand this is a very heated debate, but I'm going to just sidestep it because whatever your opinion on CBDCs is, the fact is that CBDCs are going to happen. Either they're going to exist, either they don't. If they are going to exist or some other centralized stuff that wants to be on a chain, I want Kaspa to be like the utility chain of the world. I want it to be the place, the infrastructure people would want to use if they want to build something centralized and off-chain. And of course, also for decentralized stuff. I want it to be like this global, and this is just like a fantasy, right? It's not like I argue that this is the end game, this is the goal, this is what's going to happen. Just like I would like in 100 years from now, to see that economies that are implemented as off-chain solution implemented on top of a chain would be implemented on top of Kaspa, and that the native coin would be like some sort of the global medium of exchange, like I don't know, say like 2 governments or 10 governments or all of the governments just re-implement their fiat economy as a CBDC on top of Kaspa, and then the native coin is used for like international commerce. I know this is a very, very big thing to say, and again, it's just a fantasy, but I think like this illustrates the potential. I think when I say stuff like I think Kaspa can carry the global economy, I don't mean that it would become the only coin in the world, because I think we are never going to evolve out of the need for like a fiat economy. But I think a lot of the problems with fiat economy are not with the fact that governments have fiat economies, but with the fact that they completely control how economies work against each other, and having like this decentralized infrastructure that could be used by anyone, but could also be used to implement like traditional inflationary closed governed economies would be a really cool resolution for what Kaspa is. It would essentially be like what today Swift and the entire like international backbone is today. So this is like an outcome. I don't know if it's the outcome. I guess I'm betting that a lot of people are not going to like this idea, and it's fine. Again, it's not a proposal. It's just like a fantasy. But I think something along these proportions is like the way Kaspa will eventually be used. It will be used as an infrastructure to hold global scale stuff.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of similar what like Bitcoiners would want to see Bitcoin just be used as some sort of mediator, just kind of to send money across from different places without having to worry about a government controlling the Bitcoin itself, which because they can't since it is decentralized. But the fact is Bitcoin is still slow, and that they're trying to have solutions with Lightning Network and whatnot. But the fact that Kaspa can achieve basically, or what I like to say, Kaspa solves the Lightning Network all on layer 1 already. We don't have to try to fix the speed issue pretty much with Kaspa on by adding some kind of centralized kind of way like Lightning Network is. But it is really interesting to see what could probably happen. But of course, that comes with adoption, and this in my opinion, I think would take many, many years. I mean, it's not the Bitcoin
Not
has
in our
been around.
lifetimes.
Yeah,
The
probably
way
not
I
in our
described it,
lifetimes.
not in our lifetime.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Because
you know,
you have
if
to
you're
build
asking about
trust.
within our lifetimes, then I would just like to see the emission schedule come to an end, which should be when I'm around 70, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that would be cool.
Yes, I want to see how at this point the project is still alive and how it is self-sufficient and holds on its own and has a lot of stuff built onto it, including institutionalized stuff and including decentralized stuff, and how it just becomes like this this thing that everything is built upon, and it's decentralized by hardware and by proof of work.
Yeah, that's what makes proof of work so amazing, and how I like how the protocols can't work unless it is proof of work, and it shows the power, in my opinion, of proof of work and why it is better than proof of stake, because it just introduces a rich get richer system or centralization and stuff like that. So, I could say that I'm in Kaspa mainly for the tech. As much as people say like that's like the meme, obviously you're trying to have some kind of financial gain to it, but at the same time, I think it's worthy of an asset or commodity kind of thing to be here for decades to come, as long as developments continue and people actually understand it and the adoption continues. And at the rate we're going right now, despite so much still being unfinished, is absolutely insane. We're gonna see what happens next, but it was an honor to have you on here, and hopefully maybe we could do something again in the future. Kind of recapping what after more developments keep happening, but it was awesome to have you on here.
Sure, it was a pleasure being here. Thank you so much for having me.